Hey, Thamo, what's going on, everybody? Peace, greetings, blessings to everyone that's actually tuned in to the Southeastern Talking Stick this Sunday. I like to say welcome to everybody who's in the chat or who's going to be joining the chat later on. I like to speak about some things and some thoughts that actually came across my mind this weekend, and um that's very important. Basically, what one have to do, and I've been telling people this for the longest, is to do your genealogy. Do your genealogy. That's the most important thing that you can do overall. You know, people running to do the DNA test. The DNA test is cool, fine, and dandy. But before you do the DNA test, please do your genealogy. Get to speak to the people within your family. You know, find the oldest person you can talk to. I'll find the youngest person that been around the oldest person who would be like the favorite grandchild or the favorite niece or the favorite nephew, you know what I'm saying? Or the godchild, the godson or the goddaughter, right? Get that information, sit down, even if you have to go to the old family Bibles that actually have the information about who begotten who got married, who got baptized, who got christened, who passed away. Another thing that you want to use is the obituary. You want to get the obituary because the obituary also talk about the person's life, and it also speak about the family members, like who their mother and who their fathers were and where they grew up at, right? So you have the family Bible, you have the obituary, right? Um, you also have church records. That's good to get if they was in the church, right? Or any religious institution. You can actually get records from that. Um, Also, you want to get land records. Whatever county or parish that they stayed in, you can go to the land management office, right, and get records, or you can go to the courthouses and get the records, right? The next thing that you can actually do, and I say you can use that with a grain of salt, is the U.S. Census, because in the early part of the census, they was telling the truth about who people were, right? Some of the census actually have I for Indian, and then it went from I to M for mulatto, and then it went from mulatto to B for black or N for Negro, right? Like in the census started like in 1790s. So after that, like when you get in the early 1800s, you have I. The later part of the 1800s, you'll get M. And then when you're going into the 1900s, that's when they start saying N for Negro or B for Black. But yet, it's the people that was in the later part of the 1800s with the letter M on there for mulatto. But then when you get in the 1900s, they calling them Negroes or Black, right? So now you really got to ask the question. Well, hell, if they was called Indians in the early 1800s and then mulatto later in the 1800s, and then in the early 1900s, they was called Negroes, and then it was called Blacks, right? That shows the progression of reclassification, which your family members and them already kept a record in the Bible and everything. No, most families did that. I can't speak for everybody. I know that my family done it. You know what I'm saying? Um, And also you had the old stories, and then you also had old traditions that was done and things that they did, right, around the family. So when people them trying to call you a pretendian or wobble or elbow, they don't know your family. And I'm giving you things to where you can go ahead on and do the research. Like I said once again, get your family Bible that has the family in there because most of the families like, look, we're not gonna do no rolls, we're not gonna sign up on no rolls. Even when it came down to the census, we know who we are. We're gonna keep the consensus of our own family in the census and everything, and we're gonna write who we are in our own text. And believe it or not, within the Bible, that was actually municipal for the court of law. That would actually be your witness to say who you were. Because remember, back then, at that time, they didn't really have birth certificates like talking about it. So they would record the births in the Bible. So that's a good thing to look at. The Bible. Then you have the obituary, right? Then you have church records. That's three. The fourth one is land land management, right? Five, court records. And the last part, six, is the U.S. Census. Take that with a grain of salt, because that's when they started doing the reclassification even more. I know this is an early show. Most people thought we were gonna come on for seven, but I should have went ahead on and highlighted it. But hopefully they'll come and catch it or the replay and everything. But I'm not gonna be on here long because I have a prior engagement that I must attend because it's almost about that time coming February the 17th down here in Miss Norman, New Orleans, Louisiana. They call it Fat Tuesday, right? That would be Valentine's Day is on what, the 14th of February? So 3 days after Valentine's Day, right? Down here in Miss Norman, New Orleans, Louisiana. They have Fat Tuesday. Most people know it as Mardi Gras, so um you have the traditions down here um with the carnival Indians and everything. They still keep the culture and the heritage down here going. You know, they actually have real Aboriginal people who mask Mardi Gras Indians, and then you have those who are not Aboriginals mask Mardi Gras Indian, but they still keep the culture and the traditions and everything alive. And that been going since the latter part of the 1800s. So yeah, so do those things that you can do to look up your family information because everything that you see on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and all the rest of the social medias, they're not telling you to do your genealogy. They're not telling you to where to go at and look. They're up there telling you about America is they're just all over the place. They're talking about is Samaria and or Tamarian, and they're talking about that they are the Tartarians. And I'm like, man, y'all just all over the place. They're talking about that America is Egypt and Utah is Judah. That's people that haven't done their genealogy. That's those people who never go sit down amongst tribal elders to get the information or go talk to these tribal nations that have been here for thousands of years. You know, I see that when people don't know who they are, they use the biblical reference to trying to substitute who they are. And I don't know why they're trying to use the biblical text because that wasn't even much introduced to the tribal people of this land until colonizers came. So how could you use the Bible to try to solidify who you are over here in the Americas? That don't make no sense. And you're wondering why people are calling you wearables and abos and pretendians because you're using a doctrine to try to place yourself over here in the Americas. That's not a smart move. That's not a smart move. Not at all. And you know, the only way how y'all getting information is off of TikTok and Instagram and Twitter. Y'all not going to talk to the elders of your family because if there was in the tribal ways, they'll actually tell you no, the Bible didn't have nothing to do with the land over here, or as the Biblical City of Texas they say. But then you got people who say, "Oh, everything was told in reverse. Everything that's in the Bible happened over here." Really? Oh, the Mississippi is the Nile. Really? Oh, it's the Euphrates. Wait, hold on. Wait, how is it gonna be the Nile and the Euphrates, and that's two different rivers? Y'all do things and say things to make people call y'all out of names that y'all don't like. As the old folks used to say, when you know better, you do better, right? And then y'all need to be ashamed of yourselves getting war bonnets from Taiwan and Thailand and China. Y'all need to be ashamed of yourselves. Do you even know the meaning of a war bonnet? Do you know what ceremony do you supposed to go through to have a war bonnet? And you wonder why people be up in arms because y'all doing things that's that's uncouth, as the old folks used to say. It's all uncouth. So don't take this as me talking down to y'all. This the things that the old folks used to say. It's called corrective criticism. If you cannot take corrective criticism, you're not gonna be able to make it in life, no matter who you are. Go through real ceremony and get you a real headdress that's worth of honoring your people or whoever blood that runs through your vein. Go repatriate to that nation properly. And don't go in there like you know it all because you don't know the ceremonies. You don't know the culture. You don't know the heritage. You don't know the language. It probably was something that your family didn't speak anymore, or they probably didn't do the ceremonies anymore because they became Christians or Muslims or wherever faith it may be. Go to those nations and be like, look, I'm a part of the family, and you can show and prove with your record. Hey, peace, family. Peace. That's right. That's right. And I'm so humble and honored that you came to listen and learn from family. You know, where the regalia and the headdress that represents your people. That's what it's supposed to be dealing with. Be proud of your bloodline. And don't do your genealogy just to find if you have American Indian or Native American or American Native in your bloodline, in your genealogy. Be proud of everything that comes within that tree because within that tree are many branches, and on many branches there are many leaves. Don't deny anything that comes from the root to the treetop of the canopy of the tree. Damn. Damn. I sounded poetic on that one. I sounded poetic on that one. you know? But yeah, because you got people in them that be feeling discouraged and dismayed because they haven't found any tribal people within their bloodline. Be proud what you have in your genealogy. And another thing is be proud of your admixtures because you got people that's all online talking about, oh, I ain't got no African in my genealogy. The people wasn't even much called Africans at that time. Because the continent wasn't even much called Africa at that time. That continent did not become known as Africa until the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1886 when they came out with the consensus calling that landmass over there the continent called Africa. So of course you're not gonna find nobody in your genealogy. Africans back then, people like over here, they had tribes, they have clans, they have bands. That's what they was calling themselves by their clans and their bands. They were not calling themselves Africans. I want you to go to any so-called slave ship manifest and see if they say African on there. Them people know who they was taking, and they knew them by tribal names, and they knew what kingdoms they got them from. They didn't become countries and states until after the Berlin Conference, but nobody never took that into consideration. There wasn't no country called Ghana at that time. There was no country called Nigeria at that time, right? During the so-called transatlantic slave trade, there was not countries. You see, there was no borders to have countries. Borders was a construct that was done by the colonizers. Go see when those countries became countries. And you're gonna be like, wow, okay. But see what they were before they was called countries. That's the thing. Just like over here in the Americas, right? There was no Florida, no Georgia, no Carolinas, no Virginia, no Massachusetts, no New England, no New Delaware, no New Jersey, no Tennessee, no West Virginia, no Mississippi, no Arkansas, no Oklahoma, no Louisiana, right? There was no states at the time. Before there was states, there was called colonies, right? But what was the land before they became colonies? You had tribal territories. Just like we had tribal territories over here, you had tribal territories over there in the continent which is now known as Africa, right? So people, let's get it right. Like I said, when you know better, you do better. And you want to do your genealogy. Don't be lazy, right? When somebody say, "Oh, I can do your genealogy for you," and you up there paying 1,500, 2,500, 3,500, 45, even 5,000 for somebody to do your genealogy. That money that you spending, you can do your own genealogy. Sit down there. Nobody don't know your family better than you. Well, you're supposed to. You know who your mama is. You know who your daddy is. Now, in some cases, if things happen in the so-called community, right? I'm just gonna say it like that. If you don't know who your father is, you know who your mama is, right? And if you was put up for adoption or anything, um, adoption records has been open, so you can't use that excuse that I was adopted. No, 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 no. You can find out the records now, right? Because the thing is, when you adopted, your adopted parents know who your biological mother is or your biological father is. Get that record, go to wherever state it is, and they actually open the records now that's dealing with adoption. So now you can go ahead on and do the genealogy of your biological parents, both mother and father. So when there's a will, there's always a way. You want to have the will to do. Yeah. So anybody have any questions or any comments? And I hope I gave y'all some key points in doing these things. You know, go and get the real history from your family, right? Get the customs from your family. Don't be afraid of what you might find within your tree when you go to shake it, right? When you go to shaking that tree, don't be surprised. Except the fruits that come from the tree. They're gonna know another poetic say, right? Except the fruits from the tree, right? Because the fruits are ripe. They're not falling on the ground and they have became ripe. And I know you probably have some fucked up family members somewhere, but you can't let that one bad apple spoil the bunch. As they say, that one bad apple could spoil the bunch. Even the bad apple become fruitful once it rots and the seed start growing another tree. Yeah. So yeah, genealogy is the key. That's the main thing, you know. And yeah. And then another thing is it's funny because you have Alabama, Mobile, and Louisiana, New Orleans, going back about carnival, right? But the people in New Orleans, Louisiana, and Mobile, Alabama, they didn't pay attention to school. Because if they paid attention to school, they wouldn't be fussing about who was the first to have carnival, right? Right, cuz. Right, cuz you're absolutely right. Before the colonizers had English names, they had Dutch names. You're absolutely right because what most people don't know is that when you had the Spanish and the French here, then you had the Dutch, and then after the Dutch came the English. Most people don't know that. And when you hear real English is actually Old Dutch. Most people don't know that. It's Old Dutch. If you hear somebody spoke that old king and queen English, that's Dutch. That's Dutch. Because if you really hear him speak, it would mess your head up. Right. Before the Dutch names, there were territories of various tribes, right, were called different things by different tribes. Absolutely right, because everybody had tribes. You're absolutely right. You had the Dutch tribes, right? You had um the Germanic tribes, right? Or the Goth, right? Yeah, you had all them different tribes. That's what people don't keep on failing to realize. You had tribes before they became countries and states and everything. You know, that's what people don't fail to realize. You're absolutely right, cuz. Thank you for that input. This is why before New York became known as New York, it was called New Amsterdam, right? People keep on forgetting that the Dutch in them that's dealing with that, right? Right. And the people wasn't even much Spanish at that time. They was called the Castilians. Spanish was their language, but they was the Castilians. You had many tribes of Castilians. You're absolutely right. You had the Castilians and the Portuguese. And then the Pope split that family up, right? And he told one of the cousins, hey, I give you this land here. And that's why they wind up having Portugal. Right? But most people don't know that. So when I open up and climbed in my family tree, oh boy, that family tree is amazing. It's so amazing. It's so amazing. I say that bloodline is amazing. Like on my daddy side of the family. Oh my goodness. And then on my mama daddy side of the family, I got all the way up there to the we got up there to the late 1400s. And then on my daddy side, I got up into the later part of the 1400s, right? On my father's mother's side of the family, I got up there within the 800s, going into the 1700s. And the same thing on my mother's side of the family, got up there to the 1800s and the 1700s. But on their daddy side, they wind up way up there in the 1400s on both sides. I'm like, damn. you know. So it's an amazing thing when you do your junior, right? So and don't let nobody tell you nothing different once you know your genealogy. and your bloodline and everything. Nobody can tell you different. Just like, you got people that go on my cousin page that she set up for us dealing with our podcast. They were talking about, oh, y'all a bunch of pretendians, y'all Africans, and I'm like, well, people wasn't called Africans. Now I do have admixtures that I do, but within those admixtures, I was not raised up in their customs of those admixtures. That's a difference. That's a big major difference. If I was raised up in the culture of my admixtures, that would be nice. But I wasn't though, you know. And just like they have a young lady on TikTok, she's on point when she talking about follow the law of the belly, you know, which has always been the natural law anyway. The law of the belly. That's in nature, the law of the belly. Well, what's the law of the belly? You be with your mama, you are what your mama is. That's the law of the belly. But religion wise, you had those that dealt with patriarchy, as they say. So you had some tribes that were patriarchal, you know, but mostly a word matriarchal. And you actually had cases that were done like that on the southeast. If your mother was a slave, then the child was a slave. If the mother was free, the child was free. It didn't say nothing about the father. You are what your mother is. If your mother was a slave, you was a slave. If your mother was free, you was free. Huh? That was in the Virginias. That was in the Carolinas. That was in Georgia. That was in Florida. It was in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. Right? So yeah, like I say, and like the elders in the say once again, I have to keep on reiterating this that when you know better, you do better. And because you find out that you have native blood, that don't give you the right to go where other people regalious unless you've been blessed with a regalia from that nation, from someone within that nation. Don't go and buy something and say, "Oh yeah, this is what my people. I get to wear this because we was the first ones here." Like, nah, it don't work like that. It don't work like that at all. But hey, you got these youngsters. You can't tell them nothing. You can't tell them nothing. But this is where tribal etiquette come in at. Look at up tribal etiquette. Tribal etiquette, where you know what the do's and the don'ts are, right? So, um, it's about to come down to the closing. Like I said, I have a previous engagement to go to and everything because it's about that time for Mardi Gras, which Carnival actually started on January the 6th. January the 6th is the date that they started. That's what they call it, the King's Day, where they actually do the king cake, right? They used to put the baby in the inside, but a whole lot of people used to choke on it. But now they take the king cake baby and put it on the side, or they put it on the top for people to see. But, but yeah, you know, be proud of your culture, your heritage, if you have one. Be proud of your ethnicities. Be proud of your bloodlines, right? Because remember what they say, huh? They said that on each side of your parents, you have 16 grandparents and then some, right? So just imagine all the bloodlines that goes through your blood, goes through your veins every day. And then you have children. And then your children have children, which is your grandchildren. And then your grandchildren wind up having children, and that's your great grandchildren, right? So forth and so on. And with that, within my closing, I say do your due diligence to do the investigation on your bloodlines and of your family. And when you do it on your own, man, when I say it's so rewarding because it's like a video game. It's like a video game, right? I don't know if you're a game head or not, but like if you're sitting in front of the computer and you know who your mother is and your father is and your grandparents and your great grandparents. Now you may not remember when they died, but you know they did, but you don't know what year, but you know their first name, their last name, or their maiden name, and you sit there and you going through that and you sitting there like, you know, it's like when you played Mortal Kombat or Tekken, when you got that new character. That's your new family member that you found on the family tree. Like you keep on playing around with the dates and stuff about who was who, and the next thing you know, you'll be like, oh, okay, family search or my ancestry found a new family member. That's a new character within your family that you just unlocked. Because you get a lot of people that get so frustrated. They get frustrated. They say, "Pa, it takes too much time." It's never too much time to find family. Never, never. Especially when you really want to know what you want to know, there's never no time put on it. You should even much want to put a time on it. When your ass don't have nothing else to do, sit down there and do your genealogy like you're doing a puzzle, like you're doing a crossword puzzle. The same mental capacity that you use to do a crossword puzzle, right? That's the same mentality that you use when you're looking for a family member. Or I believe that some of the African DNA that shows up for many people come from the Spanish and Portuguese colonizers. Their land were under Moorish and Islamic rule for almost 100 years. You're absolutely right, cuz. You absolutely right. Yes, yes, yes. And then sometime, you know, there's another thing too that I have to bring out about the DNA test. People, some of y'all have been reading the DNA test wrong, dealing with the percentage. The percentage is not saying that's the percentage of the people that you are. No, the percentage is talking about the population percentage of the match. That's what that is. I'm tired of seeing people on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, Facebook. Oh, I've got 97% of African in me. There is no fucking way somebody can have 90% of any motherfucking thing within their blood. That's fucking impossible. That's impossible to have 97% of African. It's impossible. People, they're not talking about the 90% of your DNA. They're talking about the 97% of the percentage of matches, you have 97% of people have the same match as you. That's what they're talking about dealing with percentage. When they're talking about you have 2% or 1% Native American, they're talking about 1% of that matching population. That's what they're speaking about. It's not talking about you got 1% Native American blood in you. No, that's 1% of the matching population. All right, people? All right, please read that shit right because y'all been reading it wrong. Y'all been reading it dead wrong. When they giving you the percentage, they're speaking about the percentages of the matches of the people. So you had 97% of the people matches that's over there in Africa. That's what it's saying. 97%. It's not saying that you 97% African. That's not what it said. It's not saying that you have 1% of American Native or two American Native. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that the population matches you. That's what it's saying. And it does not give you your ethnicity. It doesn't do that. It can't tell you what tribe you from. It can't put you in no tribe. So for somebody to say, "Oh, you came from such a yada yada yada," like nah. Just like old boy told old boy, "Oh, go ahead on and make Oprah Winfrey a Zulu." You can't make nobody a Zulu because there's no testing to show that you Zulu. So I don't know why he would even crack a joke like that to him and say, "Oh, go ahead on and make a Zulu." You know, but when people don't know, they don't know. They just fall for anything. So so once again, y'all have a good night. This is a short one, so I got another previous engagement. So I'll holler at y'all on the next time. All right, y'all have a good one. Peace.